'Tis I, your dear friend and buddy and pal, King Chuck. I hope you're having a wonderful day, wonderful weekend. I am pumped to go see Nine Inch Nails tonight at Vandal Arena here in Grand Rapids. Lifelong dream to see Nine Inch Nails. I was a mega fan of theirs in high school, and now they're coming to... You know, I probably had a few opportunities over the years to see him in Grand Rapids, but now, you know, of course, money and stuff were a big concern. But tonight, it's different. Of course, since then, Trent Reznor added another member to the band, Atticus Ross. And of course, they're touring with an act called Boys Noize. And I guess they're like an EDM act, and they've done a lot of remixes of some of their older stuff. And I've heard when they play in other cities, it is beyond spectacular. And of course, it's probably one of the most expensive tickets I've ever paid for a show, especially since, you know, I am way up in the bowl, unfortunately, but hopefully, Vandal Arena is not a giant arena. It's not like, it's not a major league arena. I mean, it only seats 10,000 people, so it's not like I'm going to be paying $123 to watch, ants and all that. But anyway, I hope that Trent will put on a good show. Trent, Atticus, and the rest of the band. I've been a huge fan of Nine Inch Nails since I was like 13 years old when Closer came out. And even to this date, my mother will get infuriated when that song comes on the radio with Trent screaming, "I want to fuck you like an animal." And, and of course, yeah, she's not a fan of Nine Inch Nails, and she's actually kind of shocked that they're still together, even though it's really just Trent Reznor. And, Trent's won a lot of Oscars over the last couple of years because of his movie scores, and it's amazing. Some of the movies are Disney flicks, too, like Soul, and the recent Tron movie. But anyway, let's get on with the rest of the show here. First, I got two Bee-otches of the day for today. And yes, we got to talk about Trump. Trump is the biggie. So Donald Trump on Friday got bitch slapped by the Supreme Court, including some of the people he installed in the high court. Donald was forced, so they voted 6-3 that Donald's excuse me, I got a little burpy today. So unfortunately, the tariffs he put on the American people were unconstitutional, especially since he did not get congressional approval. And Donald was supposed to, people were saying he was supposed to cure some of the problems with inflation. That's my dog, by the way. I'm at the park right now giving her a little walkie. And so anyway, every time we head towards the pet fence, the dog fence, she will bark like crazy. So the story is, oh, I hear some Canadian geese. Anyway, you see, folks, the Canadians were right that when Ontario put on, so the story is Trump was saying all this shit about Canada, and even here in Grand Rapids, we got all these billboards from Ontario that all said the same thing. A tariff is a tax on the American people. That's what Donald did. He is trying to encourage Americans to buy something else. Buy American. And then the question is, but here's the problem. I work in an industry, folks, that's very international. We make, my company, yes, most of the stuff we do is for the American people, but we also make products for people in Mexico and around the world. We make Chinese stuff. And the materials that our company uses are from Canada. And some of our machines are from Switzerland and Germany. And the parts are from those countries too. So, and you know, the machine I work on, it's, you know, the machine, you know, everyone keeps saying that they should have replaced this machine years ago. They haven't. You know, our company has spent millions of dollars on this equipment and that equipment, but our machine, the one I work on, well, it's one of the very few machines in the whole plant that's been there, that was there when I arrived. That was 2002. And now our machine is 30 years old. And they don't even make that kind of machine anymore. And the manufacturer has warned our company, if you need parts, you're gonna have to go through a machine shop, which is outlandishly expensive, or you just go ahead and buy a new machine. And even our repairman has even said, well, it doesn't really make sense because, you know, the newer machines are a lot faster too. And, you know, we do good running at our speed. I mean, it just goes on and on. But the reality, folks, is I get infuriated knowing that, you know, these tariffs are really out there not to help America. I mean, it's helped Trump. I mean, Kristi Noem gets to fly around in the $70 million jet plane with even her own bedroom. And of course, you know, this DeRoker chick, you know, who is like the housing secretary, I think she is, she takes her staffers all to the strip club. And it's funny considering that Trump, you know, he's a Project 2025 guy, and one of the things he wanted to do in Project 2025 is shut down the adult entertainment industry, porn. And, you know, now there's a lot of states that have virtually outlawed internet porn, which I think is a direct violation of the First Amendment. But, you know, the reality, folks, is that this is, you know, I keep saying this. I've said it once. I'll say it. I've said it before. I'll say it again. The biggest people who are against porn are people who do worse shit than what they do in actual mainstream porn. You know, they have sex with children. They steal from people. They don't pay their taxes. I mean, the list is exorbitant, or whatever that word is. But the point is, Donald Trump, it has hurt small businesses with his tariffs. And I hope, you know, and not only that, since Trump became, even before Trump became president, I hadn't had a raise in like 2 years. I'm hoping that with, you know, now Trump wants to create a 15% tariff. There was originally 10, but nope, he's going to try to jack it up to 15 for everything international because he wants to create better trade deals with all the other countries. Bullshit. Here's an idea. You know, this is part of the big reason why I will vote Democrat this upcoming November. We got to tell Trump that his ideas hurt Americans. You know, he was supposed to release all the Epstein documents. He hasn't. Instead, you know, the government released very unfortunate information on Epstein's victims, their names, their phone, phone numbers, addresses, you name it. They are hurt. We're very hurt because of this. And they're censoring the people who hobnobbed with Epstein. Folks, the amount of people, I know some people are like, and some people are like, you got to realize that not all the people who hung out with Epstein were rapists. And I know. I've hung out with some pretty shady people before. And I'm not a rapist. I'm not a sex offender. When people, I've hung out with people who were totally shady, who wanted my money, who wanted me to do everything for them. And guess what? I turned the other cheek and walked away. And I know, the Trump regime and everybody associated with it, they all have cried, when we learned about his sex offenses, we stopped hanging out with him. And then even after they learned about it, they kept hanging out with him. Why? Maybe it's because they're a part of this regime too. They're a part of this disgusting regime that's, the sex offender system that's all about, let's go out and rape young girls. Because, hey, we got money, we got power. We can do whatever we want because we have a shit ton of money in our pockets. And all I have to say about that is, this is why I will vote not Republican. I will, we need the bluest wave possible. We need to tell the Democrats too, quit, knock it off with this bullshit about, vote blue no matter who. We're tired of vote blue no matter who. I've seen too many Democrats who act like Republicans. I've seen too many Democrats who are also anti-First Amendment. We need people who care about healthcare, who care about jobs, who care about the middle class. Many Americans are making minimum wage, maybe even less. Let's boost the minimum wage. It's been $7.25 an hour for almost 20 years. Why? And I'll tell you why, folks. It's because we, the American people, make the mistake of shopping at corporate companies that have fought against the minimum wage. Work Management, Work Capital is a prime example. They own Arby's and Baskin Robbins, Dunkin' Donuts, Sonic, the Cheesecake Factory. They even own non-restaurants like Take 5 Oil Change and Stainmaster Carpets. Work fought many years ago to stop the minimum wage from going up from $7.25 an hour to where it should be, $15 an hour. And so many Americans, and people are like, you're going to hurt a lot of companies doing that. No, what you're doing is telling corporate America, fuck you. The distance between the mega wealthy and the working class has never been higher. And too many people are too blind to see it because they have MAGA on their minds. They're not making America great again. Instead, what they're doing is making it so that the average American citizen has to spend more money on essentials. Like I said, the bag of coffee I bought years ago was $12 a sack. Now it's like 18. And Trump's answer is, just buy another brand. Oh, your daughter doesn't need 26 dolls. She only needs 2. And, okay, so Kristi Noem, okay. Then how come Kristi Noem gets to fly on a $70 million jet plane while many of us don't even have the money to go fly on the worst airlines? If you need to travel. I mean, this is exactly what happens when we allow losers like Donald Trump to run our country. Jesus fucking Christ. Speaking of sex offenders, I gotta talk about the other biatch of the day. So, anyway, we talked a couple months ago. One of the most ongoing things right now is this proposed sale of Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers is for sale right now, and they've gotten several big bids. The 2 biggest bids are from Netflix and Paramount. And everybody wants Netflix to buy the company. And the reason why is because Paramount is a very vile company now that they were sold to the same family that owns Oracle. And, and tragically and unfortunately, Skydance has really fucked up Paramount and CBS, especially CBS. We all heard the story last week that they censored an interview from on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert with Representative Tallarico from Texas, out of fear that the FCC would find him. And of course, they fucked over 60 Minutes because of Barry Weiss. And, of course, Anderson Cooper just announced he's leaving the show after 20 years. Of course, he still has that gig with CNN. But if Skydance, Paramount, CBS buys Warner Brothers, guess what's going to happen? Then now Anderson will be back to working for Barry Weiss, because I'm pretty sure what's going to happen is CBS and CNN will merge and will become another pro-Trump MAGA bullshit company. Now, the only positive I see about Skydance buying Warner Brothers is that they want to keep the cable networks, whereas Netflix will spin off CNN, TBS, TNT, Turner Classic Movies, etc. And I'm like, well, and same shit's happened recently with Comcast, NBC Universal. They spun off all their cable networks, and MSNBC is now MS Now, and now that they don't have NBC on their side anymore, they're actually more progressive than what they used to be. But anyway, one of the things I talked about was the fact that Hollywood, as it is producing crap. Too many movies that end up bombing at the box office. And when a movie bombs at the box office, guess who hurts the most? The movie theater owners. And I talked about this theater owner in Bad Axe, Michigan, who unfortunately had to put up a GoFundMe page because now he's at the mercy of his banks and needs $80,000 because he keeps borrowing against his bowling alley. He owns both the movie theater in town and the bowling alley. The movie theater in Bad Axe is a 2-screener called the Bad Axe Theater. It was built in 1916. It became a movie theater in the 40s. And in the 80s, it got twinned. So, because Hollywood wants theaters to show movies on its first week of release for a couple of weeks. And, Usually if you just got a one screener, you gotta wait a month or two if you want a weekly changeover. I mean, that's what happened in my hometown of Elk Rapids, Michigan. Joe Yuquez, the owner of the Elk Rapids Cinema, had to do that. And of course, now the theater is owned by the Chalfant Foundation. I mentioned them recently. And they will show a movie for 2 weeks because Hollywood is kind of desperate right now to get, to get movies streaming. Because that's where the real money is. People don't go to the movies anymore. They go home and watch the movies there. So the rest of the story is, this guy, Mark Rolfe is his name. He tried to get $80,000 from this GoFundMe page. He raised $24,000, and then it happened. Now, I was rooting for Mark in the beginning. I was really hoping that he would get the money and keep the Bad Axe Theater going. But then what happened was, late last year, a 30-something-year-old woman went to the Bad Axe police and filed a police report against Mark. She claimed that she worked for Mark at his movie theater when she was 13, 14, and 15 years old. And this was late 2000s. He bought the theater about 20 years ago. So what happened was, she claimed that Mark had inappropriate sexual relations with her, including when she got statutory raped in the theater itself when she was about 14 years old. And bear in mind, Mark at the time was in his 30s. So now Mark was charged with CSE, criminal sexual conduct. He had to pay a $50,000 fine. And on top of that, he cannot be close to anybody under the age of 18. So Mark Mark recently realized he is definitely up Schitt's Creek. And I'm not talking about the beloved Canadian TV show that starred the late great Catherine O'Hara either. So the story was that a few weeks ago, Mark and his bank on the steps of the movie theater did an auction. They tried to auction off the theater for $220,000 and his bowling alley for like $550,000. And there were no bidders. So now Mark has to pay off his bank within 6 months, or else the bank is going to take over everything. Meanwhile, if Mark is... So anyway, the trial will happen, obviously, and Mark will probably have to plead, Mark will fight, he will probably fight to the fullest, but he could be in jail for the rest of his life. Doing what he did to that little girl. Allegedly, of course. I should say allegedly because, he's innocent until proven guilty. But, so, anyway, now the question is, so this is why nobody wants his theaters. Nobody wants his theater. Nobody wants his bowling alley. They want the bank to take it over, because when a bank takes over anything and forecloses, guess what's going to happen? The bank will, excusez-moi. So what will happen is the bank will sell it to somebody for way less money. And another question is, if Mark loses the theater, will the bank shut it down? The answer isn't always no. There was a similar situation up in Charlevoix nearly 20 years ago during the Great Recession of 2008. There was a movie theater up there called the Cinema 3. The Cinema 3 was built in the mid-90s. And the guy who owned it His name was Bill Supernaw. Bill was a former radio DJ in northern Michigan, worked at WJML in the 60s. Bill, he had the original Cinema 3 in 1972, and then he decided, okay, we're going to move the theater to another location and turned it into a 3-screener because, Petoskey's up the street. And, up in Petoskey, they built a much nicer theater with stadium seating and the whole shebang. Well, guess what happened? The theater did okay for a few years, but then after a few years, the cinema started to hemorrhage money because Charlevoix is a kind of a ritzy town. I mean, if you've been to Charlevoix, you'll see that, it's the type of town where, there's hardly any poor people. It's a rich man's town. A lot of boats, a lot of yachts. The downtown street opens up for boats because it's on a lake. So what happened was Bill lost his theater to the bank because he couldn't pay off the mortgage. So guess what happened? The bank ran the theater for, until they were able to sell it to another company or another entity. And I believe the new owner of the cinema was a guy who did, who flew a skydiving plane for a living. I think that's who bought the theater. But he sold it. The theater's been bought and sold many times over the last several years because the movie business isn't profitable. Yeah, it hasn't been. And a lot of it's because of the major studios forcing theaters to buy new projectors so they can go digital, and COVID, and now streaming. It has been a big, big problem for the theaters. So now, and of course, Mark, the sad truth is, here's the thing. Bad Axe is a town of 3,000 people. And it's a town that's very remote. It's in Michigan's thumb. It's one of the bigger theaters in the whole county, in the whole section of the state. That section of the state, I should say. Although, there's another thumb town called Sandusky. And even though that theater in town called the Firebird is a 3-screener, it was only built not horribly long ago. And it's got stadium seating. It's a very modern theater for that section of the state. So anyway, what happened is, if the Bad Axe Theater closes, hey, hardly anybody's going there anymore. It's no big loss. But it could be just the owner itself. And I think, being a small town of 3,000 or so people, there's probably a few folks in Bad Axe who have known this fact for years, that Mark had a very illicit relationship with a little girl, and and the girl turned out very fucked up because of this. Now, that's the thing about small towns. Rumors spread horribly fast. I lived in Elk Rapids, which is a town about half the size of Bad Axe. And it's true. Rumors spread like wildfire. And sometimes when a rumor is said about you, you do your damnedest to quash the rumors. But considering that Mark has been charged with CSC, and now he cannot be around minors, now it's beyond difficult for him to run that theater. And it's funny considering that right now, I checked the movie schedule at his theater, and he's showing a Christian film called I Can Only Imagine 2, which is about the Christian pop group Mercy Me. And the story, I Can Only Imagine was their hit song, and it was a song that the lead singer wrote in memory of his dad because, he was raised by a single father. The guy was very abusive, and you know, then the guy, you know, both the singer and dad found Jesus, and, you know, he forgave him for being such a dick, and that's why he wrote that song. Now, of course, apparently this movie is about the fame that Mercy Me has had, and, you know, but here's the thing. Now, I need to say this, folks. I hate people who profit off of Christianity. Jesus was a man who said, who told the rich young man, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to go to heaven. And I believe in that. And unfortunately, there are so many people who play the Jesus card and make a lot of money from it. So maybe that's part of the reason why Mark is showing this film. He's like, oh, Christian movie. Yeah, because, you know, too many Christians complained that Hollywood, stopped caring about them decades ago. Oh, man. But the point is, folks, is, you know, but anyway, I'm wondering, but, you know, I also see that there was another theater, Cass in Cass City, they're showing the film. Maybe they're trying to get, maybe a few backs, maybe people will come there. I don't know, folks. You know, it's just, I've never been to Bad Axe. I don't know what life is like there. All I know is that it's a town of 3,000 people, and it's one of the bigger towns in Michigan's thumb. But the reality is, you know, when, you know, it is heartbreaking when the town movie theater is owned by a man who is going to become a convicted felon. You know, he's probably going to go to jail for the rest of his life, and now the theater's future is kind of up in smoke at this point. And all I have to say about that is, you know, if it's true that Mark Rolfe raped that young girl, it's, you know, it's on him. You know, and it's up to us, the people, we the people, to not shop at his businesses, not go bowling at his bowling alley or see a movie at his theater. And all I have to say is, because he has monopoly in those parts of Bad Axe, you know, it's for the people of that community to stay strong, and hopefully the bank will take over the theater and find somebody suitable who can run the company, you know, the businesses. You know, it's, you know, you got to remember that there's a lot of community, you know, folks, there's Sault Ste. Marie up in the UP, 16,000 people. That town doesn't have a movie theater. The last movie theater that town had closed because the company that owned the theater decided to sell the land to Meyer. And Big Rapids has been without a theater since the pandemic, you know. But thankfully, a guy just recently bought it. I guess he owns the Rialto in Grayling. And it just recently bought it. And his car, you know, he's redoing the whole theater from top to bottom, which is nice because, you know, that theater was, you know, I guess he even tried to find out where the original marquee was. And I don't know if he found it or not. You know, the point is, folks, is that, you know, there's no excuse to rape a child. There isn't. I know that, you know, the reason why men rape women is a simple, you know, females, women, young girls. I think it's because of what happened to them during their childhood. And, you know, I look at Harvey Weinstein. You know, Harvey's mother fat shamed him as a little boy. She called him that. He said that he was too fat and he was a loser, and, you know, a lot of people knew that Marion Weinstein was a total bitch. But, you know, what happened was Harvey, you know, the problem was he became a very strong media mogul with Miramax Films. He sold it to Disney for $40 million. And what happened to him was he raped a lot of young women. And the excuse was that, well, the big film executives of yesteryear, the Selznicks and the Louis B. Mayers and all these people all raped their stars. Daryl F. Zanuck and, all these people. They did it because they use rape as a weapon. They felt that man was put on earth to tell women, you're mine. But the reality is, and that's kind of the same logic that Donald Trump and Epstein had. And, the tragic truth is, that's not how life should be. And I know that when I was a kid growing up, I grew up during, of course, one of the big movies of my teenage years was American Pie. And the basic message of the movie was that if you graduate high school a virgin, you need to kill yourself. You're going to, live a life of being a total loser. And I know, I was not cool in school. I had more people bully and use me than actual true friends. And, part of the problem, obviously, was I lived in this very small town in northern Michigan. And the truth was that, unfortunately, it's true. I went to prom with a girl I didn't like. I dated 2 girls in high school, and they both, girl number 1 didn't even like me. The rest of the family loved me. But girl number 2, she used me. She was trailer trash. She was, she didn't like me, at least sexually. I didn't like her either. And the only girls that I was ever introduced to in my life that, I actually liked were the strippers of Deja Vu. Because when I was in school, there was a Deja Vu close to me. And they, I had more fun at Deja Vu than I did at the prom. Hold on just a minute. Come on. There we go. I had to unlatch my dog's leash. The point is, but don't get me wrong. I lost my virginity eventually. But now I'm one of those people that, unfortunately, I'm too ashamed to tell people how old I was when I lost my virginity. And, my day in life has sucked. I'll be 45 in May. And, my dad lives with me, and, he's a mega Republican. And I go on dating sites, and one of the biggest turnoffs on most of the women in Grand Rapids are, I don't date MAGA Republicans. So, I've lived a life of being cock-blocked because of this. And I don't like it. So, but I look at this, and and sadly, the last girl I dated, it was the last somewhat long-term relationship I had. She wouldn't even have sex with me, even though she slept with me twice. This was a woman who sat on my lap multiple times and gave me a giant boner, and it's like she gave me blue balls because of that. Because she was so anti-sex. But you see, I understand. I have to remind myself, sex is something sacred between 2 people who truly love each other. And unfortunately, yes, there's too many women out there who have opened their legs in front of the worst guys possible. And they paid, and a lot of the kids turned out great, and a lot of kids did not. And all I have to say about that is it pisses me off that, when I go online and the only girls who do want to hang out with me are moms. Because when I was a kid growing up, I hung out with too many small kids whose parents whose mothers, I should say, slept with too many men, and they had too many kids. And, it's like, now I have to be their personal free babysitter. This is a huge reason why I don't date moms. And, childhood trauma is a huge reason why we have rapists. And, you look at what happened with Harvey Weinstein. You look at what happened with all the other rapists in this world. They didn't have a good father figure. Bill Cosby didn't have a good father figure, apparently. And, you knew what happened to him. And what even bothers me more is the other day, I was on Facebook. There's a channel called, there is a TV channel called Me TV Tunes that shows a lot of old Warner Brothers and Hanna-Barbera and Tom and Jerry cartoons. They're a classic TV channel for cartoons. And somebody said, hey, I saw a Filmation cartoon on there the other day. Do you think we should see more Filmation shows on there? And one person, a couple of folks actually said, I would love to see Fat Albert again. And I'm like, why? Bill Cosby did the total opposite of what Fat Albert taught kids not to do. Bill was doing it. There was even an episode of Fat Albert where he tells kids to stay away from porn. And yet, we all knew what Bill was doing. Drugging and raping women. Everybody who I've seen say no to porn, are anti-porn people, they have sex with children, they have child pornography in their possession, they steal from their people, they're scum. And I want nothing to do with them, quite frankly. I would much, strip clubs are holier places than churches. There, I said it. But you see, folks, I understand. When you're a lonely guy and there's no prospects out there, yes, sometimes you end up having no choice but to dip low. You lower your standards. Okay, some people are like, okay, this girl, she has a slight double chin, but, she's not totally fat. And this woman is 5 years older than I am, but she's very attractive. I mean, I can go on and on. But the reality is, I know life's too short to be with people you don't want to be around. And, the purpose, in my opinion, of being with a girl you totally like is so you don't have to go to the strip club. So you don't end up becoming an alcoholic or doing drugs. I mean, you want to be a normal, you want that hole in your life to be filled by the right person. But unfortunately, especially in my life, it's like, the tragic truth is a lot of the dating sites that I go on, they end up, most of the girls end up becoming pen pals. And I don't want a pen pal. I want a relationship. I agree. But in the case of Mark Rolfe, he's like, hey, I own these businesses. I have a monopoly of, I own a monopoly here in Bad Axe. I own the movie theater. I own the bowling alley. Kids love me because I own these places. Oh, I have this young girl who works for me. Maybe I'll fuck her. And that's what happens. And we all, folks, I know. You're not supposed to have sex with children. A girl who is under 18 is a child. And we should know better. People should know better. And, and it's like, I know pedophilia is rampant in small towns. I've seen it. I worked at a restaurant where I worked with a pedophile who ended up going to jail for 2 years for groping a little boy. And it was well known for years that this asshole, performed a blowjob on a 6-year-old boy. And then, but here's the problem. The owner's son, my boss's son, he was in his early 20s, and he was shacking up with a 14-year-old bus girl. And even more, they got married and had a kid. I think they're still together, as far as I know. The point is, folks, is I know I get angry, and some people are like, well, maybe you should become a pedophile, Chuck. I want to tell you a story. I'm on a couple of dating sites, and one of the sites I was on is called OkCupid. And I think, sadly, one of the reasons why dating sites are becoming a shithole these days is because most of them are owned by the same guy, a company called Match.com. Match.com owns Tinder. They own the aforementioned OkCupid. They own Hinge. I mean, it goes on and on. And the tragic truth is, this guy who owns all these companies, he's a he's probably a billionaire by now, making money off of lonely people, and telling people that, if you pay $50 a month, we'll put your name on top of the list. Well, anyway, so here's the rest of the story. So on one of the sites, OkCupid, I actually got not one, but 2 matches from women who admitted that they were 16. And they were like, well, the age of consent in Michigan is 16. I don't give a fuck. Okay, you're young enough to be my daughter. It's like, dude, I'm not going to fuck a 16-year-old girl. Okay? Somebody who's still in high school. I want somebody who is, got her head on her shoulders, and stuff like that, a good job, car, everything. It's like, I don't want somebody, it's like, I don't want to be a sugar daddy. That's what it is. I mean, I'm thankful for the things I have. I have a house and a car and everything, but I also don't have, but the thing is, like I said, my dad lives with me. And of course, he's probably, these women are probably going to hear my dad talk about how great and wonderful Trump is and how wonderful Charlie Kirk was. And, yeah, I have to go through that shit all the time. And I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah. So that's the point. But, the reason why I'm not a pedophile is because I know I have a conscience. I know good from evil. I know I've made really risky decisions in my life, and I've played the real life game of Chutes and Ladders. The game Chutes and Ladders, the game about kids. Chutes and Ladders is that game that teaches kids about what's good and what's bad in life, and you do a good thing, you climb the ladder. But if you fuck up and make a mistake, you fall down the slide. And I know good from evil. And, of course, it does help that I do take medication. I had panic attacks many years ago because I was dealing with work, my work and my crappy pay and my asshole boss and all the credit cards I was spending on every month because of, I was not getting ahead in life. So this is what happened. I started seeing a doctor, and he gave me Celexa, and it helped. It helped me for a while, but then I weaned myself off of it because I felt good. I felt that I was confident enough to not be on it anymore. But guess what happened? The panic attacks returned, and my doctor shut down his office when he closed his office. Without telling anybody, which is illegal, by the way. So when he did all that, and I was back to having panic attacks again, I had to look for another doctor. And it took a long time. I actually had to go into a walk-in clinic, and they gave me, I think it was Zoloft, and the side effects were worse than the actual cure. I actually lost 10 pounds. But yeah, actually I'm on citalopram these days. And it helps. It does help with my I don't have panic attacks anymore because of it. My dad has even said to me, you need to wean yourself off that shit. And I said, I don't want the panic attacks to return. I don't want to end up breathing uncontrollably for no reason because my brain is so fucked up because of what's happened to me in my past. But I would imagine that some of these people who rape children, they feel, they will find, instead of good medication and good chats with the doctor, yes, they'll fill it with alcohol, like my grandpa did, during World War II, because of, he was in World War II. He was a Navy vet, and they didn't call it post-traumatic stress syndrome back then, PTSD. They called it shell shock, and the only cure for shell shock was to go home, grow up, and be a man. And unfortunately, my grandpa had nightmare after nightmare after nightmare for years and years, and the only cure for it was alcohol. He drank himself into a stupor, and it caused his wife, my grandmother, to leave him, kick him out of the house. And I can go on and on. I'm just happy I made the right decision to talk to my doctor about some of the stuff that's going on in my life. And they've even she's even recommended going to see like a psychiatrist or a counselor. And I'm pretty sure I know what the counselor will say, and that is usually, sometimes you gotta get out of your shell and, realize that not all churches are mega, and maybe go to a non-mega church. Well, I went to one, and, unfortunately there was a guy there who begged me for money and, bored me to tears with his personal problems. And man, I avoided, it's people like him that made me quit going to church. And not only that, the church I went to, the pastor's friend was George Fartsmell, the former mayor of Grand Rapids, who got all the strip clubs out of town. And, and I'll be honest with you, I agree. Being with a woman is one of the happiest situations in my life. Oh, no, I gotta blow up my nose. Anyway, but that's the way it is. And I know that when you got money, when you're a successful businessman, that's what you do. You pray after your workers, but now those days have ended because of the Me Too movement. And now, now the guy who owns the Bad Axe Theater, now Mark Rolfe, he is on the same page as people like Jimmy Savile and Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein and so many others. People who use their, and oh yes, Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein. People who use their money and power to get what they want. And for that, it's women. To fuck every woman imaginable, including minors. And all I have to say about that is, I think I would have a better life if people treated me with a little bit more respect growing up. And I know that both my parents were kind of assholes raising me. My mom lied to me about her husband, and she felt that her husband, new husband, was better than my dad, and because he came from a wealthy family, but he was an asshole. And now my mom, 70 years old, she lives in a crappy apartment. She's alone in a crappy apartment, same crappy apartment I lived in for 19 years, and she works in fast food. Why is it? It's because she made a mistake. Big one. And for years, I had to pay the price. And now I'm paying the price because, I got out of that apartment, but now I'm with my dad. And I have to listen to him. Sometimes he'll put it on Fox News, and I'll do everything in my power to not watch that garbage. But that's him. That's him. But anyway, all I have to say is, my suggestion to the people of Bad Axe is stay strong. You knew this guy was fucked up. And I know this is tearing the community apart. But as somebody who has never been to Bad Axe, who has never saw a movie at the Bax Theater, and has never, met the guy in my life, all I have to say is, for the people of Bad Axe, stay strong. Hopefully something good will happen in the end. And it usually does. Even if it's going to take 6 months or a year or whatever. Good things happen for those who do wait. Okay, and speaking of all this, okay, it's Sunday. Time for our weekly segment. Is 1680 on the air? I'm in my car. So the story is, as I've told you in recent weeks, 1680 a.m. and oops. Okay, I don't want to get a strike. Okay, we're on 1680. Static. So what is 102.5 airing?
Destination. No matter the size or distance of your move,
a commercial.
GR takes care of everything. Make your next move the best move. Choose Rent a Man GR Moving Company. Visit www.rentamangr.com.
Rent a Man GR. Okay, that's another business we can boycott.
That's right, call 616-530. Move.
Yeah, another business that we can boycott because they're giving their precious money to Tyrone. Okay, it sounds like they're playing gospel music. So anyway, okay, of course under federal law, 102.5 and 1680 must simulcast each other, and they're not. Yeah, because Tyrone is an asshole. Jesus Christ. Okay, enough about Tyrone, enough about Mark and Bad Axe and Trump. I have a concert to go to in a few hours. Maybe I'll try to get a small nap in, because it's going to be a late night for me and my cousins. So anyway, I will talk to you another date and another time. I'm King Chuck, and good day and good luck.